Hey everyone, on this episode we will be talking about the New England Patriots and their needs going into the 2021 NFL season.
So we're going to start off by talking about the pass-catching core for the New England Patriots. It was clearly their weakness in 2020, and Bill Belichick has addressed that a bit going into the 2021 season. They've made massive moves, going after the likes of Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith. They also went after Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar in free agency, some of the earliest moves this year, addressing that position. But there's also questions about what to do with someone like Julian Edelman. He is getting older and he isn't what he used to be. So if he's not going to be as much of a contributor, are they going to cut him loose just by straight out releasing him, or are they going to try and extract some value out of him? That's going to be an interesting decision to see, given Edelman's contribution to the Patriots dynasty in the 2010s. They also do have to find a way to distance themselves from N'Keal Harry, who was their first round pick in 2019, and has performed rather disappointingly, especially considering the guys that were taken after him, people like A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, Nicole Hardman, all of whom have been extraordinarily productive with their respective teams, with Nicole Hardman obviously being a key contributor in not one but two Super Bowl appearances for Kansas City, as a not insignificant target for Patrick Mahomes and a huge contributor in the special teams. With having two tight ends like Henry and Smith, who I feel are rather underrated for their production, Belichick will be able to run offenses kind of like what they did in 2011 and 2012 when they had two elite tight ends in Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez, although that obviously did not last due to off-the-field issues regarding Hernandez, to put it mildly. And so to see what he can do with the combination with Henry and Smith, it's going to be fun to watch. That's definitely going to be interesting.
Right. Yeah, just to kind of wrap things up, I mean, I feel like they're going to start running two tight end sets the way they did with Hernandez and Gronkowski way back in the early 2010s with Smith and Henry, and they've given Cam a good amount of weapons for him to work with at both the wide receiver and the tight end positions. And with that, we'll segue to the quarterback position as well, going into Cam Newton. Now, initially, he did start playing pretty well. He was very reliant on his legs, not as much as arms, early on in the season, but they were still winning with that formula. They almost beat the Seahawks in week 2 as well, I believe, where he was only stopped a couple inches short from rushing in for his third touchdown, or what would have been his third touchdown that game. Since then, after his COVID diagnosis, pretty early on in the season, he definitely, it was visible. You could see that he had significantly regressed. He couldn't throw the ball as well down the field. He wasn't as fast. He wasn't as agile. He seemed a little lost on the field. However, a lot of that can be directly attributed to the fact that he did have COVID and he missed a lot of playing time as a result of the quarantine restrictions and guidelines put in by the NFL. Other than that, I think if Cam can continue on his training regimen and condition his way back into the lineup. He did receive an extension with the Patriots after being a free agent after the 2020 season. I can see him succeeding both on his legs and being a passer, not necessarily only of deep balls, but generally as well. I think Nelson Aguilar is a really good contested catch guy. He did have a bit of tendency to drop the ball on one-on-one coverage quite a lot, especially back when he was on the Eagles, but he is a speedster, as he proved on the Raiders and in the Eagles. He was pretty pivotal in the Eagles' Super Bowl win way back in February of 2018. Apart from that, the two tight end sets will help Cam get persistent blocking as well as catching targets. Both of those guys are pretty big, and they're very, very good at catching as well. So you don't necessarily have to throw the ball way down the field. They're really good with short screen passes, fade passes, especially when you're deep into the opposition territory and you're looking to go over the top to get, maybe either Smith or Henry over the top for a touchdown or down the middle, both of which both tight ends succeed in pretty well. So I definitely feel as though Cam Newton will be the option going forward. I don't see the Patriots using their relatively high draft pick on another quarterback. I'm not sold on Jarrett Stidham. He has decent mechanics, but he just doesn't have the killer instinct to move the ball down the field effectively. You saw that in the Chiefs game as well, but where both him and Cam played pretty much at the same level, despite one, being clearly a little bit sick from COVID, and the other just not playing as well as he should have.
Yeah, just a couple of quick points. I think we kind of underestimated how COVID would impact players coming back from the virus. Some players like Lamar Jackson did come back with a vengeance and played extraordinarily well, but others like Cam Newton, and then also if you look at a team like the Browns who suffered with it, players like Denzel Ward and Myles Garrett saw a drop in production, and that definitely affected Cam a lot because he was extraordinarily electric in those first few games. The first game against Miami Dolphins and the game against the Raiders, the game against the Seahawks, as Sean pointed out. But otherwise, he was basically forced to put the team on his back because there were no targets to throw to, and he was also their run game. And so with all these free agents, he may actually have a chance. And in terms of the draft, a lot of people have liked Mac Jones to New England, because that's around the area he might go. He did really well in Alabama. And the Alabama to New England pipeline is real because Saban was an apprentice of Belichick way back in Cleveland in the early 90s. But one of the problems with Alabama quarterbacks, as we saw in Tua in Miami in 2020, is that they are used to wide open targets. Mac Jones has played with the likes of Jalen Waddle as well as Devontae Smith, and at the next level, wide receivers are not going to get as open. Even the improved class that Belichick has gone after in 2020, in the 2021 offseason. So the transition may not be good for Jones, who will have to learn how to throw to NFL open, not to college football open. And also, Cam Newton is still a fairly decent thrower. His arm has been beat up, but he can still make enough throws to win the game. You don't want to have him throwing 30 or 40 times a game. That's a great way to get him on IR for a decent stretch of the season. But if you can get a decent balance between running and passing, Cam Newton's arm is more than enough to guide the Patriots to an above 500 record.
Mm-hmm. With that, we're going to move on to the linebacker position, which we ranked as their third most important need going into next season. Vinay, do you have any thoughts?
Their linebacking core was pretty decimated going into the 2020 season. As their superstar linebacker, Dante Hightower, I personally would put him as a future Hall of Fame linebacker. He opted out due to COVID, and so they didn't have a lot of talent going into the 2020 season. Their most experienced linebacker was Jawan Bentley, and he was the leader of the group. They will get Hightower back. He does have a little bit of rust on him, as he did sit out the 2020 season, but I feel that Dante Hightower with a little bit of rust is better than most linebackers in the NFL. So they should be fine. They also went after a few linebackers in their massive spree. They did go after Matt Judon on a 4-year, $54.5 million contract. They also re-signed Kyle Van Noy, who was previously in New England during their Super Bowl runs, but had played in Miami for 2020. They signed him to a 2-year, $12 million contract. And they also went after Raekwon McMillan, who is also a really talented linebacker and could play well. So they have addressed it, although Bill Belichick may look to spend a premium pick on the position, especially given the level of talent that's going to be available. There obviously is a player like Micah Parsons, who is electric, and should he fall to 15, given the depth at other positions, no doubt that Bill Belichick will scoop him up and use him, as coaches like Bill Belichick love versatile, athletic players, especially at the linebacking position. If you know a little bit about Bill Belichick's history, he does well with extraordinarily talented linebackers, even if they're not completely refined coming out of college. There is also a player like Zaven Collins, who he can hope and pray falls to the second round, although I don't see that happening. And a player like Nick Bolton out of Missouri, who, while hasn't gotten some of the hype that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah or Michael Parsons has coming out of college, is definitely a really, really good linebacker, and could be very helpful for New England. I don't see them going after any more free agent linebackers, though. When we originally drafted it up, we came up with a list of players we thought might be available in free agency, but obviously they've already spent a lot on Matt Judon and on Raekwon McMillan and Van Noy, so I don't really see them signing more players for that. So if they do add it in there, they add it through the draft.
Yeah, no, I definitely see it. Given the talent in the draft, I can definitely see them drafting a linebacker. And then getting guys like Hightower and Van Noy back will definitely help at that position. All right, so now next we'll move on to the D-line position.
Yeah, the defensive line could definitely use some improvement. They did address that this year. They did go after Montravius Adams for a 1-year deal. They also signed Bo Allen as well as Devon Godchaux. And those guys should make an impact on the line, especially Godchaux and Allen. On the interior, they ranked 15th in yards per game allowed and 11th in points per game without a stalwart defensive line. Bo Allen being back should obviously help. And they need to have a good rush defense, because the AFC is chock full of tremendous rushing games, although thankfully for them, their division did not have particularly great run games. If Bill Belichick wants to play in the postseason, which given some of his acquisitions is definitely more possible than we thought in December, he will have to learn how to stop some of these running games like they have in Cleveland, like they have in Las Vegas, like they have in Tennessee, and a huge part of that is going after the defensive line.
All right. Sounds good. We'll next move on to the running back position. I definitely, just to get started, I think at the running back position, they tend to go with running back by committee. For years, they've gone with Rex Burkhead, James White, who played pivotal roles in the Super Bowl against the Falcons. He even played really well against the Eagles the following year, as well as the Rams in 2019. Rex Burkhead as well. He's a kind of workhorse back that will occasionally get the ball. Not a whole lot of carries per game, but when he does get the ball, he penetrates between the tackles extremely well. They did draft, I don't know if they drafted Damian Harris actually, but Damian Harris has been their feature back for the 2020 season, and he was really good. He didn't have like a flashy season. He didn't have a 1,000-yard rushing season, but every game, one of the reasons they were always kept in, they had the chains moving despite Cam Newton not moving the ball down the field quite as accurately or quite as frequently as he used to, was Damian Harris running the ball down the ground in a ground and pound manner very well. And they did have a decent offensive line that allowed him to do that. They had Joe Tooney, Marcus Cannon, David Andrews is their center, a couple other guys as well. That was definitely a part of it, and Damian Harris played a big part in that. He's not a flashy guy. He's not, guys from the past that New England have used, like J.R. Redmond, Kevin Fogg, Lawrence Maroney, Shane Vereen, LeGarrette Blount, those guys. But he is definitely he's a step in the right direction, especially given how much talent has been acquired by New England in this offseason at the receiver position. I think he could be a nice kind of supplement. Not just him, but also Burkhead and James White if he's brought back.
Yeah, definitely. And they definitely need to do more in terms of building that running back by committee, because their default runner was basically Cam Newton. He was their most productive running back, and he was supposed to be their quarterback. And so if they want Cam Newton to be able to relax a bit and play well in both the run game, but more so the passing game, they need to make sure that Cam Newton doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting on the ground. And so adding another running back later in the draft to use in that rotation with Damian Harris and Sony Michel would be really, really good for that Patriots offense. Other than that, I think their last biggest need is probably going to be their offensive line, just because they did make a few moves to secure it. They did bring Ted Karras back on a one-year deal, and they did sign David Andrews on a four-year, $19 million deal, but they also let Joe Thuney walk, which is a huge issue to fill. Marcus Cannon is going to be back, but not only is he a little bit older, but he is coming off. He's going to have a little bit of rust on him, so they may want to upgrade the tackle position as well.
I think he might be traded away.
Oh, my apologies. He was traded to Houston. They did bring Trenton Brown in from Las Vegas to replace Marcus Cannon, but they still may need a better left tackle. I believe their starting left tackle is probably either Isaiah Wynn or Yadni Kayust. So Wynn is not bad by any means, but they may look to upgrade him if they have the chance. Although they do have Michael Onwenu, who has been probably one of the best linemen in the league, despite him being a rookie in 2020. So around a player like Onwenu and players like Andrews and maybe even Shaq Mason, they could build themselves a solid offensive line.
And with that, I think we've pretty much summed up all of the positions of need that we perceive the New England Patriots will have heading into the 2021 season.